Eight. Oh yes, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cheers, people of the world. Hello and welcome to Marketing as a Foreign Language, episode 186. I am very excited. My guest today also doesn't believe in coincidences. It is no coincidence that we have crossed one another's paths. He is a famous TEDx speaker, 3.3 million views, if I do recall correctly, on his TEDx speech. Now, imagine you are flying around the world. You got a kiddo on the way, and all of a sudden, boom, it's pandemic time. What are you going to do? Are you going to be like a lot of the folks in the industry that go, I don't know how to internet media social time, and just call it a day? Or do you drop 10 G's and go all in on virtual seminars? Well, if you're anything like our guest, Brian Miller, today, you go for it. You double down and you carve out that space. We were talking about make mistakes early, get them out of the way. And so we are very similar. And one day I do hope to have hair as cool as Mr. Miller's. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Brian Miller.
Oh man, I think that's my favorite introduction I've ever had. I'm giving you credit for that. That was incredible. Thank you for that. I was like, I want to hear from this guy. He sounds awesome.
All I'm saying is that I don't believe in coincidence. Shout out to Alejandra coming to us from LinkedIn. It's good to see you. Alejandra, I don't know if you knew this, is actually a martial arts student of mine. Every Tuesday, we do martial arts in the park. So you want to join us, Brian? Fly down to Vegas?
You know what? I don't. I don't know if you can tell, but I don't even have an ab. It's not a good look on me.
One ab. One fantastic ab. So here is the deal. Everyone knows the format of the show. We go all the way back. But before we do, I want to give you just a brief moment to tell us about the speaking that you do, and then we'll go back to where you were born and all that sort of thing. So enlighten us.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a human connection specialist, and you might be thinking, what is that? And that's exactly what I was hoping people would be thinking when I invented that title 5 or 6 years ago. I needed something to call myself after the TEDx talk helped me transition, or kind of didn't even help me. It like pulled me like a rocket ship from a career in magic, as we'll talk about, into a career as in thought leadership, whatever that is. By the way, remind me later, you need to help us come up with a new term, because when somebody asks me what I do for a living, I can't say thought leader. That's ridiculous. So when I got pulled into this world, I had to figure out what to call myself. And what I speak about is human connection. I come from the world of magic, and I speak about how magicians master the art of taking on perspectives that are different from their own. That's what magicians do without realizing it. And it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. Magic is antagonistic. I know something you don't know. So how do we create a shared experience where people actually leave excited, uplifted, inspired from a magic show in spite of that antagonism? And I realized that I could take that training that we learn as magicians and help anybody at work or at home, personal or professional, use those same principles to make better, more meaningful connections in their lives. So that's what I do. I'm an author, speaker, coach, and consultant on human connection.
He also has an ab. One glorious
almost
ab. Do you understand me? All right, so here's the deal. You were born, I'm going to guess New York?
I was, yeah, Buffalo, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So you're in Buffalo. You're incarnated. Your parents they stick together? What happens?
Yeah, no, they didn't stick together. So that's exactly the first thing that happened. Is they were divorced before I was 1. They had been together. They had been married for a few years. They got divorced before I was even 1 year old. So I have no memory of my parents being together. And it's so interesting you started there, because I've probably only talked about this once in all the years I've done interviews, because it never really seems relevant to my professional work. But in some ways, it's like the most important thing, which is I grew up in a time, and you and I look like we're probably roughly the same age, plus or minus 5 years anyway. And so when I was a kid, I was the only kid in any particular room in any particular class that had divorced parents. That was not a common thing yet. And so I had a very strange experience of being the odd one out all of my childhood. So I had a debilitating social and speech anxiety. which nobody could believe now, having spent 16 years on stages in front of live audiences as a magician and now a speaker. And I really struggled with that. And it wasn't because my parents were divorced. I had a great childhood. They split the time equally. They both gave me a great life. I don't have a sob story. It was upper middle class, suburban. I'm fine. You know what I mean? But what happened was, by having two different households, one household had a very different parenting style than the other household. And I went back and forth every single day. One day moms, one day dads, back and forth. Eventually there was a stepdad and a stepmom, brother and sister at one house, no siblings at the other house, and then step siblings at the other house. So what happened was, I learned to go back and forth between wildly different perspectives and worldviews over and over again. And I learned how to negotiate between them. Sometimes I learned as a kid how to play them off of each other, which is an evil thing to do. You can use your powers for good or for evil. But I think that somewhere in my core, without ever realizing it, this is just looking back and connecting the dots, right? But without realizing it, I think I really learned innately the power of different perspectives, and that having a different perspective doesn't mean someone's wrong. It simply means they have a different point of view.
So there you are, a young one in Buffalo. Buffalo, balmy temperatures, a lot of palm trees swaying in the wind. You're
Absolutely.
doing your thing. And you have to fight the cold. You have to fight the snow. You go back and forth. You never had this TV cultural shotgun experience, which is to say, all the shows back then, Family Matters, you know what I mean? Full House. It's always this nuclear family. It's always that, and that never existed for you ever. Right. And so, for whatever reason, you develop this debilitating, as you mentioned it, speech issue. So let's talk about that. How old are you? Are you communicating? If so, how?
Yeah, so I didn't have any trouble talking to my parents. I didn't have I didn't have language issues in terms of lisp or anything like that. What I had was really, it was a social anxiety that manifested as I got older into about middle school as a speech anxiety. And essentially what it was I just didn't know how to talk to anybody. I didn't know how to make a new friend. Not when I was little, 3, 4, 5, you're friends with everybody when you're that age. It doesn't matter. But once you start to recognize that other kids have different thoughts, feelings, beliefs from your own, then it goes off in different directions. And a lot of kids just seemed like they made friends in classes. They made friends when I went to a new school. Everybody had friends. And I would just always felt like if I had a friend, it wasn't even a very good friend. It was just kind of someone who let me hang out with them. I never felt like I belonged to any particular group. And then I was also really nerdy. My parents are both brilliant. They're both computer scientists. And so I was kind of like the straight A student that broke the curve. So I was like, not to complain about being the smart kid, but I was I didn't have friends. I was the kid that broke the curve. It was right out of a Disney Channel original movie. So I had the books knocked out of my hands. I got shoved into lockers. I got beat up a lot. And again, I'm fine. It was fine. It's not a sob story.
But I love this. Yeah. I'm gonna boom time. Yeah, so you are in front of large groups of people, and for many folks, typically the people that are knocking the books out of the hands, they are terrified of getting in front of a group of people, because now you can't physically win. You can't win. You can't be in front of a group of 1,000. You have to get them on your side. That's the only game you're playing. And so do you think, looking back, that this stretch of, I'm going to call you brilliant. I'm picking up on brilliant vibes. You're brilliant. You're young. People don't like that. They're picking on you. This divorce thing isn't really helping. Do you channel any of those emotions when you're on stage? Either as a guitar player or as a speaker.
Yeah, this is a hobby, but it's my happy place. I mean, this room was my studio, where I just did creative work, and this was just a desk when I wasn't on tour until COVID, and it became a broadcast studio where I make my living. Yeah, what an interesting question. Do you channel that when you're on stage? I'm such a different person now that I almost don't know how to answer that question, which is to say that when I think back on the story I'm telling you right now, which is maybe why I don't think to talk about this very often or ever, I feel like I'm talking about some other person. I've changed so dramatically as a person that my identity is not wrapped up in who I'm talking about now. That I feel like I was born out of that person. And we can talk about that because that was magic. So I don't know if you want to
Right.
go there, but
So
the magic is what brought me here.
let's get there. All right. So the past is a configuration of the vibration of the material of space-time, which is to say, if we were to somehow, albeit impossibly, change the vibrations of the quantum structure to be exactly 1994 Buffalo, we would then be in 1994 Buffalo.
Sure.
So right? And so the past obviously only exists as a like neurological vibration in the present. So as you identify and talk about who you were, you're putting a lot of distance or even like a metamorphosis inside of the way that you choose to look at that. Do you feel like it is an illusion, like a magician, or an actual magical transformation where it is a new thing?
Well, I think everything changes, and I think if you really want to talk about the metaphysics of time and personal identity, we can 100% go to that because what you probably don't know in all the conversation we had before this or during is I actually have a philosophy degree, and that's what I was heading off to a PhD to do. So if that might be what you're picking up on right now, I was actually starting a PhD in analytic metaphysics when I decided actually I'm going to do card tricks for a living and went off somewhere else. So this is kind of my jam, academically, philosophically. Yeah, I mean, the past. It's interesting, right? Because where we are now is necessarily tied to the past, and people get really wrapped up. And this is where the philosophy meets the real world, which is people get really wrapped up in questioning doing the what ifs. Well, what if I had done something differently that day in that one day? You lay awake at night, you remember that one thing, that awful thing that happened. Oh, what if I had just taken a left turn instead that day? What if I hadn't responded with anger that one day? And it's a really silly question. And the reason it's silly is what people wish they could do is go back and change the past. But you can't because all of space and time exists exactly as it's going to. It just what's going to happen is what's going to happen. What's worth questioning is if I were in a similar situation today, would I make the same choice or would I make a different choice? That's where you get agency. You get agency in wondering, would I do things differently if presented with something similar? In other words, am I willing to learn from what happened? And so in that way, things change over time and they necessarily change. And they've studied this. When you ask people, this is so interesting. It's one of my favorite studies ever. When people are surveyed and they say, do you think that 10 years from now, they say, do you think that 10 years ago, you were the same person as you are now? And they say, oh, no, like I'm a totally different person than I was 10 years ago. And then you ask the same people, do you expect to be a totally different person 10 years from now? Everybody says, no, I've pretty much finished changing. I know who I am now. I understand my beliefs and whatever. And then they follow up with those people 10 years later. It's a long-ranging study. They say, same exact questions. 10 years ago, you feel like you're different. I'm a totally different person 10 years ago. What about 10 years from now? No, I've pretty much finished changing. We have this ability to believe that who we are now is static, that we're stuck, that we're fixed, that nothing could ever change for us again. But at every moment in time, we believe that we were a completely different person 10 years ago, which tells you you are going to be a different person 10 years from now than you are today, which means there's options, there's opportunities, there's things that you could do to change. If you're going to change anyway, it may as well change for how you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. There was a meth addict artist that I met on a beach in Venice Beach, California, who took shout out to Caroline Walsh. Oh,
Hello,
we have a
Caroline.
cameo. You guys ready for the cameo? Come on, kiddo.
I'm ready.
Yay!
Hey!
It's cameo time. Hold on. Let's turn up the volume so you can say hi. Did you know that Brian, our guest today on the show, is a magician and a guitar player.
Oh man.
Exciting. Okay.
What's your name?
Annika.
Annika. Is that spelled with a C or a K?
K.
It's spelled with a K? That's so crazy. I spell Brian with a 7. How weird is that?
With a 7, you silly goose.
I know.
I'm 7 years old.
You're 7 years old? That's how old I was when I was your age. See, I could go right back into magic. I could go right back into that world. I fall right back into it.
I love that. Okay, so Annika, I'm gonna do this as a live stream, so everyone can see us right now. Do you want to wave to everybody?
Hi, everybody.
He's gonna do a magic trick. Let's watch.
Oh, we try here. I'll just do the little, because people are so fascinated by the coin roll. I mean, almost anybody can learn to do it, but you know. You can just practice that yourself. You can learn how to do that.
Wow, isn't that cool? Okay, we're gonna get Brian one question and we'll keep doing the interview, okay? Okay, ask Brian your one question.
What's your middle name?
You know what's so funny? My middle name starts with a K, just like Annika has a K. It's Kenneth, Brian Kenneth Miller.
Wow.
Kenneth?
Isn't that great?
Yeah, and that's almost the same as Kellen.
Yeah, my name.
It is almost.
We look like we could be related, huh?
Yeah. and you both look like you wear the same glasses.
I was thinking that earlier. That's so fun.
we both are incredibly handsome. Okay, beautiful girl.
This is my favorite interview.
Just so you know, lunch is gonna be soon.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Can you shut the door behind you, kiddo? All right, love you, proud of you. This is precisely what's going to happen to you in T-minus 6 years, in case you're wondering.
Oh man, I'm so excited. That just made my day. That was awesome.
Dude, well, thanks for doing the magic as well. Yes, so I don't know if you're a big tea drinker. Have you gotten into loose leaf tea by chance?
I love loose leaf. I'm a big coffee guy, but the right time of year I'm into loose leaf, and I do have a nice set like you have there, and I'll steep it properly in the thing with the loose leaf. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think mine's from Tivana. I'm a mall loose leaf drinker.
Oh, good, dude. If you get a chance, and shout out to people watching the show now and after the fact, but Leo Lucchidi, watch the Leo Lucchidi episode. He is my tea guy. He owns Tea and Whisk. It's called a chagwan, which is the Chinese word for a tea shop, and he dedicates his life to tea. This is what he does.
Awesome.
And he has taken me through a tea journey that is difficult to describe in the English language and Chinese as well, actually.
You know what's so funny about that? I bet it is difficult to describe, because as a student of philosophy, that was one of the things that we learned, because learning it in English, being English the only language I speak. I mean, I can do Spanish a little bit from 8 years of that, but English is only. So studying philosophy, everything we learned, we had to read the English translations because we were English-speaking students. And our professors used to remind us constantly, if you're reading something from these famous philosophers that feels like it's way too ambiguous, that's not because it is ambiguous. It's because it's been translated to English. And English is a very bad language for philosophy because there's so much context. English requires context. The same word can mean 17 different things depending on the context, the tone, inflection, what day it is. And that if you're reading like something that's been translated from German, German's like this unbelievably precise language that has a different word for every possible context. So yeah, we had to remember. So when you just said it's hard to describe in English, yeah, that's because English is a bad language for describing the world.
Yeah, and lost in translation is a thing. I read an article that said that si quieres aprender español es muchísimo más fácil que aprender mandarín. 4 veces más fácil. ¿Me entiendes? So if you spend a year learning Spanish, you'll be 3 to 4 times further down the road than if you spent that same year learning Mandarin, because the differences are just ridiculous. But I'm trying.
Wild.
But anyway, so this
That's
little
awesome.
tea, dude, it's so much fun. But these characters here on this tea tray are Cha Yuan, and it literally translates to tea destiny.
Huh.
Tea
That's
destiny,
so cool.
bro. I don't know if you know
it.
Lao Tzu. Do you know Lao Tzu from Chinese philosophy? Ever heard
Just
of this dude?
well, I know of. I've read a little bit, but not in a long time, because I was doing mostly, European analytic contemporary philosophy. But yes.
Father of Taoism.
Yes.
And in the Chagwan that I was mentioning earlier with Leo Lucidi, he had this giant wooden piece of art, and it was of Lao Tzu under a tree with two students serving tea.
That's awesome. My favorite thing about the Tao Te Ching is that I think it's the first sentence loosely translates to the Tao is ineffable. And I remember as a student thinking to myself, then what is in the rest of this book? If the Tao is unknowable, what am I about to? Why isn't the book blank? I don't know.
Seriously, you know what? Someone asked me a really pointed question the other day, and I was eating a burrito at the time, and I had a very Taoist moment where I just ate the burrito. I just looked at it, just kept munching on the burrito because I mean and then after a good 45 seconds, she just laughed. She just busted out laughing.
That's so funny.
'Cause
Yeah. You have to commit. If you're going to do a bit like that, you have to commit. Too many people get that. That's a thing that young, or not even young, but just amateur speakers will do when I work with them, because I do speaking coaching and TED coaching. And when I work with them, a lot of times a line that's supposed to be funny or insightful, even worse when it's supposed to be like deep or meaningful or insightful, like a mic drop moment, they'll get nervous. They'll say it and they'll get nervous because the audience doesn't react or they don't hear anything. So they just power through to the next line. And I have to keep working with people. It's so hard to say, no, you have to let the moment sit. You owe it to the audience. You're actually being selfish when you step on that moment. You have to let them accept what just happened. You have to let them internalize it, think about it, see how it affects them for a moment before you move on. And it's really hard. Silence is really scary, but silence is mostly scary to the speaker. Silence is rarely scary to an audience because they need time to sit in it. So that's what that reminded me of is, yeah, if you're going to be like, I'm just going to keep eating this burrito, you can't do it for 5 seconds and then jump back in because it feels awkward. You got to do it for a minute and just commit to it. And then maybe it's funny or maybe it's not, but at least you gave it a chance to be. You gave it a chance to be what it should be.
Yes, sir. Couldn't agree more. In Tai Chi, Tai Ji. So Tai means very, Ji are the poles. And so like North Pole, South Pole. And so very poles means the yin yang. So literally Tai Chi, we would say Tai Chi, but Tai Chi is a yin yang. And then Quan is fist. So Tai Chi, when you see people doing Tai Chi in the park, they're doing yin yang fist. And in Chinese culture, there's something called the bubbling well. And this was going to be awkward. I'm going to show you on my bare foot. Barefoot, boing. That's your bubbling well right here. And the reason it's called the bubbling well is because when you're pushing against someone, it feels like you're standing on pressure. When someone's pushing you, they're kind of tossing you anywhere but that centered. People are like, I just need to get centered. The martial arts equivalent of that is literally balanced or imbalanced. Yeah. And so I feel like people that are willing to be silent are like martial artists that are willing to stand there next to an opponent and it's fine. Just fine. I'm comfortable. And then the other person gets uncomfortable. And now that they're uncomfortable, they're going to go do something and they're going to overextend.
Thank you. So everything worth doing is created in tension. If there's no level, if you're not uncomfortable at all, you're not learning, you're not doing anything. Nothing is going to happen. This is true for you. You're a marketing agency. If you're working with clients, your clients have to be a little uncomfortable or they're never going to get where they need to go. Speakers need to be a little bit uncomfortable. You have to make the audience a little bit uncomfortable. It doesn't mean insult them. It doesn't mean say something you shouldn't have said. It means tension is good. Tension is what ratchets things up and helps us get momentum. You have to wind something up for it to go. I'm thinking about like all the little now that I've got a baby, right? Like the little kids' toys that you wind up and they send across the room. If you don't wind it up, if there's no tension, they don't go anywhere. It's boring. So yeah, no, I'm right with you on that. I'm so happy you said that. It's a point that is so missed. It's not talked about very much, but like tension is good. Tension is good.
Yeah, we literally build muscle by breaking down the structure so that it may rebuild. I talk a lot about how men should cry more.
Again, like, yes.
I mean, really,
Absolutely.
just dude, ball, because that if you
Tension
forever hold,
release.
that's what I'm saying. Because if you want to flex that muscle, you have to release the tension. You can't just like hold the
Yeah.
weight forever. You have to rest. You have to release,
Yeah.
and now you can flex more and release. And so that's the emotional flexibility and strength that I think a lot of people in relationships wish more men had. You know, the ability to really feel it, to really suffer, to allow the body to mourn, and to allow the body to be almost like a hurt animal. I was bawling so hard the other day that I was kind of you know how like you watch yourself, you can like see you kind of disassociate, like like, you know, it's like Kellen is doing this sort of thing, and I know it's ridiculous to refer to yourself in the third person, but sometimes,
No,
you know,
I get it. I get
I
it.
see myself, you know, and I was just looking at myself and I was going, dude, he's like an injured animal. This like whimpering, injured, sad animal, you know? And I was just like, oh, this poor dude. And so in a similar way, if you're fighting and someone, dude, just clocks you on the jaw, you feel bad for the guy. You're like, oh, but you learned something. You learned that that left hook is not something you're prepared for.
So I've heard, as you may or may not know, or could tell from our earlier conversation about my
Ab.
almost an ab, I don't get into fights. Although I do have a funny story about a real quick one, because I know we're wrapping it up here, about, you mentioned men, I wish more men would cry. One of the most difficult situations as a speaker I ever did, I was keynoting a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago now, the Utah Correctional Association's annual conference.
Whoa.
So that's the cool thing about having a topic like human connection. I can go into almost any industry and do my work, and I get to do really cool industries. And so I was there. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, and the audience that I'm about to step on stage for is just a sea of burly dudes, correctional officers with their arms crossed at 8 a.m. And I'm this skinny former magician who's about to talk about empathy and perspective taking for an hour and a half. And man, I almost left. Like, I almost got on a flight home. Like, there's no way, right? This is going to be the worst speech I've ever given.
Best
And it was a
speech ever.
massive success because those guys just needed somebody to tell them it was okay to be a human being. They just needed permission to let it down for a second. And we laughed and we cried and we got serious and we got funny and we talked through stuff. And it was, you know, the client raved about it. I got a testimonial from my website, you know, but like there was a real transformation because they were all tension and no release, you know, like they had tension down, but they had never learned how to just let that thing, you know, let that thing go. So yeah, totally with you there.
So yeah, to me, it is a battle. I know, you know, let's use music as a common language. Ba da ba da 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 da. It's the right. It's and then the satisfaction of delayed gratification by way of music. Great public speakers are very similar in that regard. You walk up there and everyone's nervous. Everybody, I mean, maybe you're the anomaly, you know, and you get up there and you don't feel anything. It's like you just woke up. But if you're like most people, even Mike Tyson in his heyday, you know, I mean, you get up there like, whew, train for this, you're ready for this.
If you're not nervous, you're not giving anything to the audience. If you're not nervous, you got a group of people in front of you, whether it's 5 people or 5,000 people. If you're not nervous that what you're about to say isn't going to connect with them, isn't going to be worth their time, then you're not giving it up. Like my dad was my coach when I was a kid. I actually was an athlete as a kid. I joke about it now, but I was this very serious athlete until injuries took me out of it. So I can joke about it now. But my dad was my coach on a lot of big national touring teams. Actually, I'm gonna do a name drop so you can pick it up for me in a second. But I grew up with, well, I knew him as Robbie. The rest of the world now knows him as Gronk. Rob Gronkowski, originally of the Patriots, of course. Now he's with the Buccaneers. But we played basketball together as a kid. So like I played with some really serious athletes. I was like that kid that was good enough to be on the team, but not good enough to be in the game. Like I was good enough to be there, but never to set foot on the court. Like I was allowed on the court if we were either winning by so much or losing by so much that it didn't matter. And then I got my moment. But my dad, he used to say to me, if I would ever come home from a game and I would be like, oh, I want to go like hang out with my friends, like I want to go play with my friends, he would go, then you didn't try hard enough today. Because if you got home from a game and you are not passed out on the floor, you didn't give it your all. You should be, he used to say, leave it on the court. Yep. Right? That's how I feel. Leave it on the stage. When you're going to do an interview like this, you've done a million of these. I've been a guest on a million of these. But both of us are here. We showed up with everything we've got. And maybe it goes well, maybe it doesn't. Hopefully this was interesting. I have no idea. But at least we both gave it our true selves for half an hour.
Yeah, dude, I'm all about it. What a phenomenal guest, Brian Miller, ladies and gentlemen. If you're listening to us after the fact on Spotify or iTunes, thank you so much. We appreciate you. For everyone who joins us for the live, we love you. For the vast majority of folks who join us after the fact on YouTube, we appreciate it. 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You know the drill. I want to give Brian an opportunity here at the end of the show to selfishly self-promote. So why don't you tell the fine folks why they should call you, why they should hire you, why they should refer you to people they know in the public speaking space.
Appreciate that very much. So I'll make it real quick. There's two ways. If you're listening to this and you're in a leadership position or know somebody who is at an organization, I come in and do both speaking engagements and workshops. They're all virtual right now, and they are about human connection. And so the workshop I've been doing for the last year is called Remote Connections, Building Trust in a Virtual World. It's all on Zoom, and it's for interdepartmental communication, team building. I also do it for marketing and sales, connect better with clients, prospects, customers, real meaningful connections that matter. So there's that. And then if you are somebody who aspires to be a TED speaker, a TEDx speaker, if you're a thought leader, coach, consultant, small business owner, executive at an organization, nonprofit founder, that kind of a person, I do both low-level group coaching, although I just closed my current group, but I for this season, and I do high-level one-on-one for the people who want to go through the entire process, learn it, get accepted at a TEDx conference, and then conquer the red dot. You can get all of that info, get on the waiting list, or schedule a discovery call at conquerthereddot.com.
Conquer the red dot.
Yeah. Oh, and my website is brianmillerspeaks.com. That's where you can find all my speaking stuff and that career. Yeah.
I'm saying. And then you have a podcast too, right?
I do. I never know what one. I always don't want to give too many things out when given the opportunity.
That's all good.
So listen, if you enjoyed this conversation, my podcast is called Beyond Networking, and I have the incredible honor of having legends and leaders of industries. So the people who wrote all the books in your library, they're the people who come on my podcast. So Seth Godin, Cal Fussman, Shama Hyder, Julian Treasure, the big names, the TED speakers, Heather Monahan, folks like that. They come on and they have a conversation much like this that is nothing like any of the conversations they have on all those other podcasts you've heard them speak on. They don't talk about their latest book or project. That's not what they're there for. They come on to talk about the relationships and chance encounters on which they built their careers, their lives, their success. And we get like exclusive stories they've never told anywhere. It's awesome. So it's Beyond Networking with Brian Miller is the podcast.
If you're thinking about the networking, you just have to think cosmologically. It's beyond.
That's right.
Networking.
It's beyond networking. We're hoping to reinvent networking over there.
That's right.
It's not handing out business cards.
Bro. Actual relationships. So the reason why this podcast, this whatever you want to call it, the show is designed the way that it's designed is because at the end of the day, what matters in 2021, it's building relationships with human beings. So if you want my take as an advertising agency owner, that's what you got to do. So use the methods and mediums that are out there to build relationships with humans. Because guess what? We invented money.
That's true. That's true. It only works because you and I still agree to it.
That's right. That's exactly right. This has value. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for swinging by the show today. We appreciate it. We'll check you for the next episode tomorrow. Thank you, Brian.